What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today we'll be bringing you the first installment of the season of our weekly ranking show we do over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel. And yeah, this is more of our brief overview of our rankings, talking about our biggest discrepancies from ECR, if you guys don't know what that means, expert consensus rankings, and kind of just giving you the brief rundown if you're making your DFS lineups or if you want that competitive edge on your league mates, that summary of how we have players ranked. But the start of this show is going to have our in-depth breakdown of these guys. This is more just a recap, more of an outline. So, Corey, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. And if you guys want access to our weekly rankings, you just want to see where we have players ranked, who you should start, who you should sit based on where we have them ranked, you can get access to them one of a couple ways. So last year we gave them away completely for free. This year it's not totally for free, but it's also very easy for you guys to access. So if you guys purchased our draft guide, you will have access to our weekly rankings. If you go to our website, you'll see that we kind of revamped everything. There's a tab that says Bush's weekly rankings, Danny's weekly rankings. You guys can see them that way. So if you want access to our weekly rankings, you can go to our website right now and purchase our weekly rankings for the season for $20 using PayPal. Or if you don't want to do that, you can use Underdog Fantasy promo code FSE at first sign up and deposit $10 minimum, and then you'll get 25 on top of whatever you deposit on the site to play with. And you'll get our weekly rankings on top of that just for free, just as a thank you for using our promo code. And like I said, if anybody who already had the draft guide, you will have access to our weekly rankings totally for free because you bought our draft guide. So that's all the housekeeping nonsense out of the way. Like Danny said, this is going to be a brief overview, guys that we have higher comparatively to the other experts around the industry, guys that we think are great starts this week, or maybe guys that were a little bit more hesitant on lower to consensus. So we're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this.
All right, so let's start off with the quarterbacks, and let's take it away with the guy that you have specifically as the main rise in your rankings, and the guy that you actually have in your top 5 overall at the position. Take it away with Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, with Ryan Tannehill, I think when you look at this game, it actually currently has the second highest projected over-under at 53 on the slate. The only one that's higher, I believe, is Chiefs and Browns. And a lot of people, especially in DFS, are going to focus on Kyler Murray as the main, he's one of the chalkier plays this week from a DFS perspective. But I think Ryan Tannehill going up against that Cardinals defense, really depleted secondary. Malcolm Butler retired, Patrick Peterson no longer there. It's really just Byron Murphy and Marco Wilson and a bunch of other slappies out there outside of Budda Baker. So I think the Titans passing game is one that I really think could have a field day in this one. And according to PFF, both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones have top 7 matchup advantages this week at their wide receiver cornerback matchup. So I really like the Titans passing game specifically, but Ryan Tannehill obviously being a big part of that. He's my quarterback 4 on the week.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Again, I have him closer to consensus. He's at my 9, but that's not anything to do with him. That's more to do with the fact that I am confident with all the quarterbacks that ended up playing last night or are slated to play on Sunday. And of course, I mean, you did have Dak a little low, so I'll give you credit there.
Yeah, for sure. So the next guy that we have a little bit higher than consensus, and you're a lot more in line with me on this one. I have Kirk Cousins, quarterback for the Vikings, 6 spots higher than consensus. You have him 4 spots higher than consensus. A guy that we hailed pretty much all offseason as someone with a very favorable early season schedule. Kirk Cousins heads into a matchup against the Bengals with Trey Waynes likely out, who is their best corner on the team. And Jefferson, Cousins, Thielen, they all have great matchups this week. And from a DFS perspective, a lot of people will be focused on the other side of the ball with the Joe Burrow side of things, Joe Burrow passing against this Minnesota Vikings defense. But Kirk Cousins and the Vikings offense should have a field day in this one. So he's a guy that I really like as a streaming quarterback, and I would play him over some more questionable matchup guys like Matthew Stafford, for example.
Yeah, no, I definitely fully agree here. He is currently my quarterback 11, right in line with the Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts, Kirk, or Justin Herbert area of my rankings. And yeah, when you're talking about Kirk Cousins, we've talked about it in the Strength of Schedule show that it's a guy that has historically been phenomenal against opposing weak defenses that really struggle. And Cincinnati is going to classify as that. Again, this can be a high-paced, fast-scoring game. And if Minnesota wants a chance to win this game, they're going to have to put up points, and that's going to happen with the right arm of Kirk Cousins. So I fully agree here. I also have him in my fringe top 10 area at 11. The next guy on our list, obviously the flip side of the matchup, is going to be Joe Burrow. I currently have him as my quarterback 13 on the week. I believe you have my quarterback 12?
Yeah, I have him as 12.
Yeah, okay. And basically same thing that we echo with Kirk Cousins, but on the flip side, if we expect the Vikings to be able to really take advantage of a porous Bengals defense, we're going to expect the highest paced offense behind the Cowboys last year to have to put up points in response. Again, this is going to be a game, sorry, that I expect to hit the over.
Yeah, the over-under is actually not very high. It's like 47.5. I would really be smashing the over in
Yeah.
that type of matchup because Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, both of these guys can perform against two, lackluster defenses. And Joe Burrow, obviously the more chalky play from a DFS perspective this week, but both guys are good starts in standard redraft leagues if you guys need to stream them this week. And another guy that we have a lot higher than consensus, if you're looking for a dart throw in a DFS league, or if you need to stream a second quarterback, third quarterback in Superflex, is Zach Wilson, quarterback of the New York Jets. I have him 9 spots higher than consensus. You have him 7 spots higher. I have him currently as my quarterback 16. Going up against the Carolina Panthers defense, a defense that was really exploited through the air last year. They did add some pieces, J.C. Horn in the top 10 of the draft at corner, but I expect this Jets offense, now healthy with Elijah Moore out there, with Corey Davis out there. I think those three guys are a perfect budget stack in a DFS lineup, and I also think Wilson could be a guy that you stream. And I have him ranked higher than Matt Ryan, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Trevor Lawrence, Jimmy Garoppolo, Sam Darnold, who's the other quarterback in this game. I think Wilson could be a guy that is a sneaky top 10 quarterback on the week.
Yeah, I could definitely see that again. I have them significantly higher, and for the most part, I feel like consensus hasn't really sharpened up to how good this Jets offense we think is going to be. Again, we are significantly higher going into the season. We're going to be significantly higher on him in week one. Again, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, a good wide receiver core going up against a porous Carolina secondary. Despite J.C. Horn being added, I mean, he's going to have his hands full week one against a top echelon type of wide receiver with Corey Davis. So I'm perfectly fine with having Zach Wilson up here. Again, this guy that's shown out all training camp, all preseason. And for his current price outside the top 20 quarterbacks, you're getting a guy legitimately in DFS that can end up helping you win in your lineups given his cost. So I absolutely love Zach Wilson this week.
Yeah, and now from the guys that we're higher on to the guys that we're lower on, and a guy that you guys probably heard us talk about being lower on all offseason, Russell Wilson. I have him 4 spots lower than consensus. You have him 2 spots lower. This is really a pace of play type of game script issue for me because I think the Colts, people forget really fast that the Colts were one of the better defenses in the league last year before they started suffering some injuries. I think both teams' game plans in this game will be to run the ball because that's both coaching staff's tendencies. So I don't expect the Cowboys-Buccaneers game that we saw last night with all these pass attempts. I expect a game where both quarterbacks are throwing 28, 29, 32 times or something like that. And in that type of game, you're obviously going to need elite efficiency from Russell Wilson, and he could definitely deliver that elite efficiency. He's been doing it his whole career. But I like more volume options this week, like Kirk Cousins, like Joe Burrow, to a guy like Russell Wilson.
Yep, no, I absolutely agree here. I like Russell Wilson, the player, but even you didn't even mention a guy like Jalen Hurts. I'd prefer Jalen Hurts this week because of the rushing acumen, because of the potential pace of play with the Eagles versus Falcons game. So it's not that I don't like Russ, it's just that I like options that are currently around his range. And especially if you're in DFS, Russ's price, because in real life he's a top 3 to 5 quarterback talent, it's always going to outweigh the potential rewards you can see in this type of matchup. So I would steer clear from Russ this week in DFS. And obviously, of course, if you're in your season long leagues, you don't have a better option. Most likely, I'd probably just roll with Russ, but expect more so a back end quarterback 1, top end or quarterback 2 type of numbers, as opposed to the mid to low end quarterback numbers you should expect from him usually.
Yeah, for sure. And another guy that I'm a bit lower on is Trevor Lawrence. Again, this really comes down to what I saw from Trevor Lawrence in the preseason. I don't think Trevor Lawrence can be a bust or a bad quarterback necessarily, but even despite this Houston Texans defense, which is terrible, it's probably one of the worst defenses in the league. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have his growing pains early in the season. I don't think this Jags offense is going to get out to a flaming start and be torching teams left and right. So Trevor Lawrence is a guy that I'm kind of deploying a wait and see approach before I throw him into my lineup. So if you drafted Trevor Lawrence, I hope you also drafted a Kirk Cousins or someone like that to pair with Trevor Lawrence so that you don't have to, deal with those growing pains in your lineup.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree here. Again, like people might point to the fact that, oh, the Texans have a terrible defense. Oh, what should we really expect in that game? We should expect the Jags to put up points. But at the same time, as good or as bad as the Texans defense is, and it's bad on both fronts, but this was legitimately one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. last year. Like genuinely speaking, like in NFL history, it was that bad on an efficiency basis. And this could very well suit a James Robinson type of game script. A Carlos Hyde 13 for 48 and 2 touchdown type of stat line. I actually tweeted that out, but it's just funny because these are the type of games where you'll see multiple running backs put up 1, 2, 3 touchdowns. And at that point, like, yeah, Trevor Lawrence might be super efficient, might be a super real life quarterback from the efficiency basis, but I just don't expect him to throw a ton of touchdowns in a game that I expect the Jags to handle pretty significantly early on.
Right, right. And I think what we've seen from Urban Meyer so far is a commitment to the run game, especially with a rookie quarterback. He probably doesn't want him slinging the ball 41 times in his first start. He's probably going to have him, controlled passing attempts, screens for Laviska Shenault, things that are probably not high ceiling type of plays. So that's the quarterback position. Those are the guys we're higher on, lower on. Like I said, we are going to go into the running back position, and a guy that obviously is in the news for a couple bad reasons right now, but also for some good reasons in DeAndre Swift. Prior to this murder investigation news, and again, we're not going to speculate on it. We don't really know what the details are. When we get presented with the details, we'll deal with them then. But for DeAndre Swift's fantasy sake, I hope he didn't do anything wrong criminally or legally. So we have him both 5 spots higher than consensus, and he's a guy that I'm willing to roll out in my lineup simply for one reason. He is game script proof. I know it's the San Francisco 49ers front is going to be tough to run against, but the Lions have a great offensive line. Again, we've already talked about this ad nauseum all offseason. They should be able to get some push on that offensive line, and DeAndre Swift is a phenomenal receiving back and good in pass protection. So even if this game is won handedly by the 49ers, I think the Lions will be playing catch up. Swift will be catching some passes.
Yeah, that's the type of scenario where you see Swift getting 10 plus targets in this game. I genuinely see a case for that to happen. Now, is that a lofty expectation for a running back? Yeah, but do you expect any receivers apart from TJ Hawkinson to garner the targets in a game that the Detroit Lions should be behind at least relatively early? Again, this is a strong San Francisco 49ers offense. I don't necessarily believe this to be the closest of games. And if that's the case, I mean, Jared Goff's going to have to throw the ball 40 plus times. Who's going to throw the ball to you? Tyrell Williams? Quintez Cephas? No, like he's going to throw the ball to the 2 best offensive players on this team, TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift, which is why for both of them, I'm pretty decently higher on them than consensus. DeAndre Swift being 5 spots higher. And although we won't mention Hawkinson, I do have him in that fringe top 4, top 5 area. Him and Mark Andrews is super close.
Yeah, I believe I have him 1 or 2 spots higher on consensus as well. And like you said with Swift, man, like with the rush coming, with Nick Bosa back from injury for the 49ers, he's going to have to get the ball out of his hands quick. And Swift is going to be a safety valve most likely in this type of game. And I think that's pretty much going to be the story of the Lions most of the year, which is why we were so high on Swift coming into the season. So on the other side of the ball in that game, we are also higher on Trey Sermon, another young running back, rookie running back. I have him 6 spots higher than consensus. You have him 12 spots higher than consensus. So I'll let you talk about him first.
Yeah, and this has more so to do with the fact that as much as I like Raheem Mostert, we'll get into him a little bit in the fallers. I feel like out of this whole backfield, Sermon's role is the most indestructible. I mean, we're talking about a legitimate size, speed guy that can fill on all 3 downs. I mean, 230-pound back, prototypical workhorse size. And of course, the main alert here is if we think that the 49ers are going to put up points and Trey Lance is not playing, potentially taking some of those red zone looks from him, I expect Trey Sermon to be a fiend on that goal line today, or not today, on Sunday. And if that's the case, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking about a Trey Sermon 1-2 touchdown game, maybe like 80 yards from scrimmage. And if that's the case, I have him ranked as my 19th running back right now. He is going to be at minimum an RB2 if he's able to score touchdowns at the rate I think he can against a porous Detroit Lions run defense. I mean, we talked about the Houston Texans being bad.
Detroit Lions were the worst in the league last year against opposing fantasy running backs, 27.5 fantasy points per game. They allowed 19 rushing touchdowns on the season, 1,855 rushing yards on the season, over 100 per game. So again, this is a horrid run defense, right? And they didn't really do too much to upgrade their run defense. Most of their high-end draft picks were spent on offense with Penei Sewell, and in other places in the secondary, they added some pieces as well. So this is a team and this is a game script. Again, you could steer away from Trey Sermon by the fact that he's a rookie running back. Maybe you don't want to take the risk if you have a guy like Chris Carson, Miles Sanders, someone who you have a more concrete role in mind for in week 1. Maybe you go in that direction, but Trey Sermon has a great matchup in this game. And you're probably going to be, kicking yourself if you sit him, because I think even if Raheem Mostert is involved to a 10 to 12, 14 touch workload, like I said, 27.5 PPR points per game was what the Lions defense allowed to running backs last year. So even if Raheem Mostert has an okay game, I think Sermon, like you said, should be able to garner a touchdown, some receiving work in this game.
Yep. No, absolutely. And moving on to another back that we actually have the same splits in terms of me being higher versus you being higher. And a guy that you have 6 spots higher, again, I have 12 spots higher. James White, a guy that we've been basically echoing all offseason, starts his first week off with the New England Patriots, going up against the Miami Dolphins in an intra-divisional matchup.
Yeah, and James White's a guy that is going to have a concrete role. If you play in any kind of PPR league, which most people do, James White is pretty much a lock for 4 to 5 targets at minimum a week, and he could have those 8, 9 target games that help you, solidify your flex spot because James White is the pass catching back on this team. Damian Harris, as much as I like Damian Harris, is not going to carve out more than a 15 target role, 20 target role, probably on the whole season. This is James White's role in the offense with Mac Jones now starting. We don't have to worry about Cam Newton as a mobile quarterback, not throwing the ball as much to James White as we saw last year. James White's a guy that consistently gets 70, 80, 90, 100 targets sometimes per season. And with Mac Jones, a rookie quarterback, he might be, under a lot of pressure in this game, maybe not able to make a lot of quick decisions. And he's going to find his safety valve veteran running back in James White.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree there. With James White, I've talked about it all offseason, but I feel like genuinely in a PPR format, maybe even half PPR, to be honest, you should expect low end RB2 type of numbers. And this matchup is no different. I mean, that it should be a decent Miami front, should be kind of a sluggish interdivisional matchup, not really a ton of separation on the outside. And if that's the case, the best safety valve for this Patriots offense could very well be the receiving back that has lauded such a target share in his recent years with the team. So I absolutely agree here. Mac Jones being there can unlock the potential of James White.
Yeah, and I think James White's a guy, just real quick, I want to go over some like fringe flex running backs that I would start James White over. For me, I would start him over Kenyon Drake. I would start him
Yep.
over David Johnson. I would start him over Tyson Williams. Any Baltimore Ravens running back, I would start him over. I would start him over Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, anybody like that. I think James White's a safer play than all of those guys.
Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon, I have
I would start
I have
Melvin
one spot
Gordon.
higher than James White, but I think it's definitely a conversation if you wanted to. In a full
Yep.
PPR league, I think I probably would lean a guy like James White over Melvin Gordon.
Yep, absolutely agree. So we talked about the three we are higher than in terms of consensus. So we'll talk about the two that we're lower than. Obviously, the one I kind of alluded to earlier, but the main one is going to be Joe Mixon. And listen, he's a fine low end RB1, but the fact that he's kind of getting ranked at what RB7 overall right now, like, why?
Yeah, he's ranked higher than Najee Harris, even though he has what I would consider a worse matchup than Najee Harris. The Buffalo
Easily.
Bills is a run defense. Like they're a run funnel defense. Their pass defense is very good. Their running defense is not good. It was like at league average last year. They allowed the 10th most rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs in the league last year. Najee Harris is a full-fledged bell cow, which is why I would take him over a guy like Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, I have 4 spots lower than consensus. I have him as RB11, but I would start, and I doubt anybody has decisions like this to make, but I would start guys like Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson, James Robinson. I even think it's a conversation with a guy like Austin Eckler, even despite the injury, with Joe Mixon, because Joe Mixon is a guy that I don't expect to be super efficient because I don't think he's ever going to be super efficient. This is probably a guy that gets 22 carries in this game, but he might only rush for 60 yards because that's kind of the player Joe Mixon is, and that's why we weren't very high on him coming into the season. Sure, he could get into the end zone, catch some passes, but I'm not super high on the Joe Mixon breakout this year, and I think he's probably going to have an inefficient game with a lot of volume like he's probably going to have all year.
For Joe Mixon to really live up to where Easier has him, he would need to have, again, his 25 touches, which he should be expected. I'll admit that. And he'll have to be significantly involved in the passing game because this Vikings front seven is no joke. I mean, we have the 2 interior defensive linemen coming back. Obviously, Michael Pierce opted out, and obviously bringing Dalvin Tomlinson in free agency. That's going to be a stout interior. Again, Daniil Hunter back from injury after he got hurt last year helps a ton. And obviously, we know their linebackers with Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr back there. I mean, this is a really stout front seven against a very poor Cincinnati offensive line. If Cincinnati wants to move the ball, similar to how Dallas was on Thursday Night Football, they're going to need to throw the ball. They're going to need to throw the ball because their front or their offensive line is simply going to be outmatched by this Vikings front seven.
Right. And game script could play into Joe Mixon, right? We don't really know how involved he's going to be in the receiving role. If they are throwing the ball like crazy and Joe Mixon gets 6, 7 targets, then that's great news, obviously. And we'll have to change our tune on Joe Mixon going forward. But again, I expect this to be, like Danny said, like the Dallas game plan going into yesterday's game, because I don't think they're going to be very effective running on the ground. And I think Vikings on the other side of the ball are going to put up points too. So they're probably going to need to throw from that perspective. And like you said, you alluded to it already. Raheem Mostert, we have lower than consensus, 4 spots lower. For me, 6 spots lower for you. We just think this backfield is a lot more Trey Sermon than we do Raheem Mostert. I think a lot of people are assuming, and I think ECR actually has Raheem Mostert ranked as the higher running back. And I think it's Trey Sermon's backfield from what we've seen so far. Raheem Mostert missed a lot of training camp, a lot of the preseason, and Trey Sermon had a lot of time to work with the first team, similar to what we've seen in Denver with Javonte Williams. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by the fact that we have Sermon higher, but Sermon to me makes the most sense as the starting running back for this team because he has a 3-down skill set. Raheem Mostert is not the best running back in the receiving game. He's not a guy that could probably win very much on the goal line, and he's also dealt with a litany of injuries over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, fully agree here. I think Sermon has the more ideal 3-down skill set. And with Raheem Mostert, yeah, is he going to be efficient with his touches? Absolutely. But he's probably not going to have a touchdown role. I'll be honest. Trey Sermon, bigger back, should have that goal line role. And Raheem Mostert has historically not been a factor in the receiving game. So realistically, if you're betting on Raheem Mostert to return RB2, RB3 type of potential, it needs to be on a
It needs to be a
15
70-yard
carry.
touchdown.
Yeah, that or like a 15 carry, like 105-yard and touchdown type of game. Like that's what he would need.
Yeah, exactly. And again, he can make us look really stupid by busting off a 75-yard touchdown. Even last year, he broke off a couple of touchdowns like that, even with his limited season that he had coming off of that injury. So I think Raheem Mostert's a guy that you could definitely throw into your flex spot. But if you have both 49ers running backs, Trey Sermon's the one that I'm actually starting. Now, let's move on to the wide receiver position because there's a lot more of these guys. So we can go a little faster on this one. Justin Jefferson is my wide receiver 1 on the week. And the
Same.
reason... Yeah, exactly. The reason is because of that Bengals secondary. Trey Wayne's out for the game. We expect, again, a lot of points in this game. Kirk Cousins was a guy that we're going to be starting at quarterback. If you're in a DFS lineup, stack Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen, and probably run it back with T. Higgins or Jamar Chase or whatever, because I think this game is going to be a lot more high scoring than Vegas is kind of touting it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And a little side note in our League of Tone Setters, I actually have the stack of Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, and Justin Jefferson going this week. So rip to my opponent. But yeah, when you're talking about Justin Jefferson, we know who he is right now, an elite separator going up against a porous secondary and one in terms of a game script, in terms of a pace of play that we think should be a super, super high scoring game. If this is the game where Justin Jefferson goes off for 185 and 2 touchdowns, I would not at all be shocked. In fact, I actually expect it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And another second-year wide receiver that we have a bit higher. I have Jerry Jeudy 8 spots higher than consensus. I have him inside my top 24 wide receivers on the week. You have him 4 spots higher than consensus. Jerry Jeudy, the reason I like him so much this week is because the Giants defense doesn't really scare me a whole lot. Like, it's a pretty good defense. I'll give them that. But James Bradbury is their number 1 cover guy, like a Dory Jackson, number of other corners that they have there. They're not the corner that James Bradbury is. And I expect James Bradbury to take away Courtland Sutton in this game, which is why I like Jerry Jeudy. Now, again, I don't know for sure 100% that Courtland Sutton is going to be shadowed by James Bradbury, but I expect it to happen. And I'll, kind of update people on Sunday morning if I hear anything to the contrary. But I really like Jerry Jeudy this week from a DFS perspective. From a season-long perspective, he's a guy that I'm very happy to throw in my lineup.
Yeah, and I don't have Jerry Jeudy as high as you do, but again, I still think he's a locked and loaded top 30 wide receiver this week. Again, Courtland Sutton, expected matchup against James Bradbury. I think Adoree Jackson's a fine option, but realistically, Jerry Jeudy's going to shake him like freaking salt and pepper. Like it's just going to happen like nobody's business out here. Yeah, I love Jerry Jeudy, and I think that this could be a sneaky higher scoring game that people want to admit, specifically because I'm just kind of higher on the Denver ancillary pieces than the consensus is. As a result, I'm going to rank Jerry Jeudy accordingly.
Yeah, I totally agree. So a couple other guys that we could talk about. Elijah Moore, we both have pretty significantly higher than consensus. If you have Elijah Moore on your roster, I have him 13 spots higher. You have him 16 spots higher. I believe he's inside my top 40 wide receivers. I'm not exactly sure where I have him off the top of my head. I have him at 41, actually. So he's just outside the top 40 wide receivers for me. This is a guy that I think you can throw into your flex spot if you guys play in like a 3 wide receiver, 2 flex league. I definitely think you can flex Elijah Moore this week. We haven't seen him quite yet. He is coming off a quad injury, but he's been practicing for about a week and a half, 2 weeks now. I think he's okay from that injury. We know that Jamison Crowder is going to be out for this game. It sounds like Keelan Cole is actually a game time decision is what I saw on Twitter today. So it's going to be the Corey Davis and Elijah Moore show in this game, I'd imagine. And if Corey Davis has any problems with JC Horn and coverage, which is who I expect him to see, then Elijah Moore can absolutely eat. And I think Elijah Moore, man, like you guys know how high we've just been on this guy in general. We expect this guy to make an impact right away.
Yeah, I absolutely agree here. I have him 16 spots higher for a reason because at the end of the day here, I think I'm actually being careful with this ranking. I really wanted to put him higher than this, but then I'm like, he's a rookie, week one, yada yada. No, I expect fully once Elijah Moore goes for his 8 for 130 and a touchdown game week one, he's going to be a staple in our top 25 to 30 wide receivers.
Yeah, that's a bold take. I definitely could see it happening. A couple guys that were that way last year, Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins, both of us have them. I have them 2 spots and 1 spot higher, respectively. You have them both 6 spots higher, respectively. So I'll let you talk about both of those guys.
Yeah, and with Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins, and Joe Burrow, we talked about that potential pace of play, that potential high scoring output of that Bengals and Vikings game. Listen, I love Jamar Chase. He's been struggling throughout training camp. Tyler Boyd's a fine slot option, but the main alpha on this Bengals team is T. Higgins. Therefore, he's going to be ranked inside my top 20. Listen, I expect this guy to have an 8 to 10 target type of game. And if you're given that type of alpha X style wide receiver, that amount of targets, look out because I genuinely think again it's going to be a staple stat line I like predicting, but 120 yards, maybe a touchdown, high scoring game, like I don't know, 38 to 31 type of game. I can see T. Higgins absolutely exploding. And then with Brandon Ayuk, I mean, listen, like this Detroit Lions defense is absolutely pathetic. He's got by far the most advantageous matchup according to PFF right now. He actually has a 95 rating against the
That's
against
among
the
any receiver in the league, not just the Lions 49ers matchup. Yeah, he actually has the highest matchup grade advantage, 95.0, labeled as excellent. Basically, they expect him to see a lot of Jeff Okudah, who struggled his rookie season. So Brandon Ayuk did not struggle his rookie season. So I'd imagine that this Lions defense is probably going to get worked by the 49ers and especially Brandon Ayuk.
Yep, absolutely. So we talked about these stud sophomores, and we actually alluded to Elijah Moore as a rookie before them. But we're going to get into another rookie, and we're going to get into another secondary that may be young, may have some upside, but God, Devonta Smith is absolutely going to carve through the freaking Falcons like butter this week.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, we don't exactly know. He's going to see a lot of AJ Terrell, presumably, because he is their best corner on the Falcons. He had a pretty solid rookie season, but I mean, I just expect Devontae Smith to be a target hog wide receiver. We saw him used in the short game, intermediate game, deep game, has yet to be seen, but I think this is going to be the guy that leads this team in targets throughout the season. I think it's going to start right away because this was a 4-year college player. He's got a lot of experience playing football at a high level in a very good conference at Alabama, played in a lot of very important games in college, too. I don't expect Devontae Smith to come into the NFL and struggle right away. I expect him to get acclimated quickly, unlike Jamar Chase, for example, who sat out last year, maybe needs a little bit more time.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree with that. And again, we're looking at it. I mentioned I have Jalen Hurts actually decently high this week. You guys who think I'm so biased can hate me on that for whatever, but the main target in this game is going to have to be Devonta Smith. Dallas Goedert's fine, Zach Ertz, whatever. Jalen Rager's hot dog piss. Like Quez Watkins, sure, I guess. What, 5 target type of guy? No. If the Eagles want to have success in the passing game, Devonta Smith is going to have 10 plus targets. There's just no other way.
Yep, for sure. And another guy that's a pretty popular, I guess you could put really any Jags wide receiver in this list, but we have Marvin Jones, 8 spots higher than consensus. Again, a little narrative-y, but I think Marvin Jones is the veteran receiver. DJ Chark's been out for a couple weeks with a broken finger. Laviska Shenault, we're unclear what his role is going to be. 11 personnel, whatever, 2 wide receiver sets. I think Marvin Jones is going to establish a connection, probably already has, with a rookie quarterback because he is a veteran receiver. He knows where he needs to be. He's going to help Trevor Lawrence out. So I think early in the season, Marvin Jones is going to be the go-to guy for this Jags offense. And that probably starts in this game because that Texans secondary is awful. And like we said with Trevor Lawrence, I don't really expect Trevor Lawrence to have a huge debut game, but I think Marvin Jones can catch 7 passes for 65 yards, maybe gets into the end zone.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. That veteran outside contested catch type of wide receiver. Chenault and Chark should get theirs, but realistically here, in terms of a transition game for a rookie, again, it might be narrative-y, but I just kind of believe that Trevor Lawrence is going to see his big alpha wide receiver and want to really rely on him early on. So I'm going to trust Marvin Jones here. Guy that we're lower on, though, is going to be Robert Woods. And again, this is nothing really to do with Robert Woods himself. Again, he's got a decent matchup going up against a Bears secondary that lost their top corner this offseason. But this kind of just more so translates to the fact that we're higher on Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, and not only that, but we're higher on some of these guys, Ayuk and Higgins, and some of the guys that we think have a higher weekly ceiling than Robert Woods. Again, one thing that I would like to caution you guys, when you guys are listening to other podcasts and other advice, when they talk about where they have players ranked, they are looking to win an accuracy competition. So they're going to rank players like Robert Woods, who have a safe weekly floor, higher because they know it's not going to ding them as much in that accuracy competition. We don't care about an accuracy competition. We are ranking them
Ceiling.
based on who we would start over who. So Robert Woods, yes, he might finish higher than we have him ranked. I probably am willing to bet he would finish higher than we have him ranked right now. But T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, these guys that I have ranked higher than him, they have way higher weekly ceilings. They're both in great matchups. So I'm going to rank them higher than Robert Woods because I don't care about an accuracy competition.
Yeah, and talking about accuracy competition, listen, you want to rank Juju Smith-Schuster as the wide receiver 34 this week? Sure, that's probably where he's going to finish. I'm not starting the wide receiver 34. I don't want to start the wide receiver 34. So therefore, in that range, I mean, we mentioned Elijah Moore. Talking about ancillary options later on, like I currently have
Marquise
like
Brown, for example.
Jacoby Myers, Jarvis Landry, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman, like Debo Samuel. These are all guys I would start over Juju Smith-Schuster. I see Juju Smith-Schuster's probably 7-8 targets, like what, 55, 60 receiving yards, and maybe he squeezes a touchdown. Like, cool. That's low end flex production. I don't search for floors, I search for ceilings. Juju Smith Schuster, if you had the unfortunate business of actually drafting him to your team, no thanks.
Yeah, again, he's a guy that you could throw into your flex spot. He'll probably give you a decent floor, but again, there's higher ceiling options that we're going to be starting every week. Juju will be a recurring guest, I'd imagine, on the weekly rankings as guys that we're lower on because that's basically how we feel about Juju. We don't really want to start him. He's Sterling Shepard in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. That's basically the type of player he is. So let's move off of wide receivers, get to tight ends, and then we'll close this one out. Again, with tight ends, there's a lot more variance that you guys are probably going to see week over week because outside of the top 5, top 6 tight ends, it's really a crapshoot at the position. We're just basically looking at matchups, looking at who can exploit their matchup that week. So one guy that we actually disagree on, I have him 1 spot lower than consensus. You have him 9 spots higher than consensus, is Jared Cook, a guy that you were higher on all offseason.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm kind of looking at this is that the Washington football team secondary is probably going to do a decent number. I mean, this is a talented secondary group, obviously with William Jackson, Kendall Fuller in the fold. If there's going to be any type of secondary that can limit those outside wide receivers for the Chargers, it will be a team like Washington. So therefore, I'm going to look at the athletic downfield seam threat that Jared Cook could represent for a Justin Herbert. Again, the linebacker play, we'll see how Jamin Davis is used, but if Jamin Davis is not used up the seam against like a guy like Jared Cook, I just don't necessarily see enough athleticism to carry this guy up the seam. And of course, we know Jared Cook by now. He's always a threat for a long touchdown. I mean, we saw it with the Saints, efficiently used. He's got his offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, coming in to efficiently use him down the field. I just can kind of see a scenario where Jared Cook probably has like 5 targets, 55 receiving yards, and probably scores a touchdown. And at the tight end position, you just look for a guy that is attached to a good offense. Now, is the offense going to put up a ton of points this game? Yet to be seen. But I would rather just trust Justin Herbert and Jared Cook as opposed to guys in this range like Mike Gesicki, freaking Gerald Everett, Hunter Henry, like even Dallas Goedert to a degree. I mean, like, are we really sure Dallas Goedert's going to outproduce Zach Ertz on that team?
Right. And with tight ends, we always get carried away with the young guys, but we saw yesterday an old guy taking advantage. And we told you guys to draft Rob Gronkowski all offseason. So we're going to count that as a win already. I know it's week 1, but I'm going to take a victory lap anyway, because people, like you said, we're taking Gerald Everett and guys that are completely unproven over Rob Gronkowski.
Anthony
and I think
Firkser.
The same kind of applies for Jared Cook. Jared Cook has been a usable fantasy tight end for like 7 straight years, and he hasn't slowed down one bit. So if this Chargers offense is willing to use him, as long like we can monitor the snap share in week 1 and things of that nature, because I know Donald Parham has like a cult following for some reason, but Jared Cook could definitely be a guy like Rob Gronkowski that a lot of people are like, wait, why weren't we drafting Jared Cook high as soon as we see him play? And I'm a little lower on him. I just expect this Chargers offense to struggle moving the ball, period, against this Washington front, against this Washington defense. I don't expect them to put up a whole lot of points, and that makes me not want to bet on a guy like Jared Cook, but your scenario could definitely play out. So a guy that we both are in lockstep on is Cole Kmet, +5, both of us. Again, I've been championing, both of us have been championing Cole Kmet all offseason. He is the starting tight end for this team. The Rams, kind of similar narrative to the Washington football team. Jalen Ramsey We don't know if he's going to shadow. We don't know if Darius Williams is going to shadow. But either way, we expect the Bears wide receivers, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, probably struggle a little bit in this game with Andy Dalton, with Justin Fields, whoever ends up starting or whoever ends up coming in at halftime. Because I do think there's a reasonable possibility that Justin Fields comes out of that in the second half, because Andy Dalton could have like a 10 yards of offense first half against this Rams defense. And I think that's a legitimate possibility. So Cole Kmet, to me, is a guy, because of those hard matchups on the outside, we could see him get involved as the tight end over the middle of the field for either Andy Dalton or Justin Fields.
Yeah, and if the Bears are going to put up points, listen, we've actually seen last year that if there's one area in this pass defense for the Rams, like you can probably exploit them with the tight end position. I mean, I saw it live, obviously, before Jarman got hurt. He had a decent game. Dalton Schultz came in, had a decent game. When you have Jalen Ramsey and Darius Williams on the outside, it is going to be hard for those wide receivers to get separation. So therefore, that former second round pick tight end, a guy that has progressed as a rookie, has looked good all offseason, dominating that seam, dominating that underneath route area for the Chicago Bears. I love Cole Kmet, and getting him as the tight end 16 here. ECR has him as tight end 21. He's just a guy that I'd be willing to put in my DFS lineup. If you're playing that Sunday night slate, I think he could be a sneaky flex option in those teams. So I fully like Cole Kmet. He could have a similar situation to, generally speaking, what we saw from Jimmy Graham early last year, where he was a top 8 tight end and he was doing it on the back of touchdowns. Only now, I think, once Justin Fields actually touches the field, you'll have improved quarterback play.
Yeah, for sure. And another guy that we do have higher, and again, this is the highest scoring game on the slate, Cleveland Browns and Kansas City Chiefs. So we expect the Kansas City Chiefs to put up points, because that's pretty much all they've done since Patrick Mahomes has been their quarterback. So we think the other side of the ball, the Cleveland Browns, will have to put up points as a result of the Kansas City Chiefs putting up points. And Austin Hooper, currently my tight end 11 on the week right now. I think he can be a guy that produces a 4 for 55 and a touchdown, like we talked about with Jared Cook, because this team is going to have to throw the ball. They can't run the clock out and run Kansas City out of the stadium. Like, they're going to have to throw the ball against this team. You can't win. You can't beat the Chiefs 21-10. Like, it's just not going to happen. The Browns defense is pretty good, but they're not going to stop Patrick Mahomes every drive. So I think Baker's going to be throwing the ball 35, 40 times in this game. And if that's the case, Austin Hooper's the starting tight end of this team. He should be able to catch a couple balls.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And again, the huge discount we've been getting on Austin Hooper all offseason, well, once people see that he is actually a solid tight end and is going to put up points in a game where the Browns have to put up points if they want to win, I wouldn't be shocked if even that tight end 11, tight end 12, where I have him, that ends up being a quote unquote disappointing scenario in terms of our expectation. I can see a scenario where he's a legitimate fringe top 5 tight end on the week. I mean, I think he's more talented than a lot of the guys that we're putting in this range. Like, if we're talking about specifically in this range, like
Gesicki, Hunter Henry, guys like that.
Yeah, like Gerald Everett, Hunter Henry. Yeah, like I would much rather a guy in Austin Hooper, who I've seen has already produced as a top 5 in fantasy before.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of Gesicki and Hunter Henry, they are guys that we're lower on. And again, we're probably going to be lower on them all season long, because for whatever reason, ECR loves these guys. Again, it's probably accuracy contest related, why they're always higher. So -3 for me on Gesicki, -5 for you, -5 for me on Hunter Henry, -3 for you. Both of these guys are low ceiling options. They are back end tight end 1 at most if they get into the end zone. I don't think, with Hunter Henry specifically, he's sharing the tight end room with Jonnu Smith. With Mike Gesicki, they brought in a bundle of new weapons with Will Fuller, who's not going to be playing in this game, but they still have Parker. Waddle will be making his debut. So I don't like either of these guys as low ceiling options. I don't expect either game that they're going to be involved in to be very high scoring. Obviously, they play each other. So that is the whole situation with these two guys is just, I'd much rather start a higher ceiling option, because the tight end position is never a safety and never a safe play on a week over week basis. So at least give me a guy with a ceiling like Cole Kmet or Austin Hooper, for example.
Yeah, absolutely agree here. And if you guys watched the ranking show last year, you'll know my quote unquote hatred for Hunter Henry. But why does ECR love this guy so much every freaking year? Like, last year, people want to award him as like a top 6, 7 tight end on a week to week basis. I remember there were some weeks he was getting ranked ECR wise ahead of like TJ Hawkinson. Like, I don't know. The infatuation for Hunter Henry needs to stop. And if you've been watching the Fantasy Stock Exchange, hopefully you're not in love with Hunter Henry, because you clearly haven't been watching the Fantasy Stock Exchange, if that's the case.
Yeah, for sure. So that was the end of our ranking show. Again, we are going to be kind of breaking these guys down, our differences between us and ECR. Each week on Fridays, we're going to try and get it to you guys, after Friday injury reports, around the time that this is going to be coming out for you guys today. As I said, if you want access to our full weekly rankings, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, half PPR, whatever you guys need, you can get it, like I said, one of 2 ways. You can go to our website, thefantasystockexchange.com. You can buy our weekly rankings for the season for $20, or you can go to underdogfantasy.com deposit using promo code FSE with a minimum of $10, and you'll get our weekly rankings for free on top of the $25 bonus that you'll get on Underdog Fantasy. And you could start playing some of these pick'em contests and weekly drafts that they have going on. They're
Battle
really
Royale.
fun. I did one last night for the Cowboys game, and I kind of got shafted by the fact that Amari Cooper was the first pick. And he was obviously the MVP of the game. And I ended up taking Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Didn't work out too well for me there.
Damn, son. But yeah, anyways, love y'all. We'll see you tomorrow. Obviously, Bush's betting show coming on, so stay tuned for that. And as always, hope you enjoy. Peace out.
Peace out.